And welcome back, everyone, to Paranormal Stakeout. My name is Larry Lawson, your host and guide, as we travel down this road of the unimagined, the unexplained, the paranormal. And I'm coming to you from the X-Zone Broadcast Network's Southern Command Post in beautiful Vero Beach and Fellsmere, Florida. And tonight we have with us on our journey paranormal researcher Steve E. Asher, freelance writer, artist, musician, folklorist, and also with previously over 10 years in law enforcement as a correctional officer in the Commonwealth of Kentucky's prison system. He is a worldwide traveler, most recently traveling to Thailand, where he and his wife adopted one of their 2 sons. Steve is an avid lover of the nighttime. He has said that this is when he feels truly the most alive, in the darkness of the night, and therefore the most productive in his paranormal research and writing. Steve is a native of Princeton, Kentucky. Steve, welcome to Paranormal Stakeout, my friend.
Hey, Larry, I appreciate that. You know, it's funny hearing you read that. Every time I hear that, I'm like, man, that makes me sound so much cooler than I am. So mysterious.
Well, hey, what you do is interesting and mysterious, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. You've been involved in the paranormal in one way or another for how long now?
Well, I mean, if you're going back from having experiences in it, I mean, since my early childhood.
Really?
But, it's, I had some encounters with different things, shadows, an apparition one time of my great grandmother after she had passed, but that was very few and far between at that time. That was 2 isolated kind of events that didn't happen all the time. I'm not one of these folks that see people in every corner and spooks up every tree, that type of thing. But it definitely kind of set the tone for me as a young guy. And like I said, it made me very fearful of that, which did in turn lead me into researching, because it's one of those things, the only thing you fear is for itself and whatnot. And I thought, well, maybe if I had a better handle on what these things are and what they're capable of, that way I would have some idea of what I'm dealing with and either be able to dismiss it or defend myself against it if need be.
Well, and being in the world of law enforcement, and I can truthfully attest to this, is you have a natural curious streak about you. You want to find out the answers. You want to find out what this is about. You spent your early years working in law enforcement as a corrections officer in state of Kentucky's prison system. How did that influence where you're at today, a writer, researcher? How did that?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, it was one of these things as of research. It helped to me validate some things that I've heard from different people growing up, and from my father who had worked in the DOC in Kentucky beforehand, before he went on to larger things in law enforcement, as an officer and chief of police and things like that. It definitely was the sort of place where it was sort of not to over dramatize it, but sort of a tinderbox. You already have all the elements, and the emotional, the elements, the confinement, the isolation, the mental stress, the conflict between officer and inmate, and inmate to inmate, and sometimes officer to officer. I mean, if you've talked to many people that worked in the system, I mean, some people have worked in very healthy systems, and some people have worked in places as like, well, you don't just have to watch the inmates, sometimes you have to watch the officers too. So you have all that, plus that vibe of, well, this is just how we've always done it. The penitentiary, and like I said, again, I know a lot of good people that are very solid at work there, and a lot of the administration are very solid, but there's this old vibe of, well, this is the way we've always done it. And so you kind of keep, you just keep reinventing the wheel there, and there's not always a lot of room for growth in regards of how things are handled day to day.
And I'm sure you'll agree, prisons, jails, and certainly hospitals, probably the trifecta of paranormal activity throughout the world overall. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, for the fact of the violent nature of just the everyday, and it doesn't even have to be a thing that there is violence every day. You live in a constant fear. You live in a constant sense of hyper alertness, which borders almost like a PTSD. But it self serves you. It keeps you alive. It's not generally situations that kill officers, as you probably know, a lot of times it's the stress related from it. A lot of times drinking to cope from it. A lot of times people, their families disintegrate, before they even retire. And the average life expectancy, if I'm not mistaken, is maybe 2 years after retirement for most prison guards. And, that's telling, that there's a lot of stuff that people carry with them. And I'm not saying, ghostly activity kills you, but just the stuff that's obvious in your face is there, and you become haunted. I still have. I get up now, and it's been since 2010. Shortly after 7 a.m., I go, well, okay, we're getting ready for shift change. They're obviously bringing the guys down out of 5 Cell House to lunch. I knew that place in and out. I knew it because it never changed. It was very compartmentalized, and it was very much done in a military order. Everything had its time and its place, and anything jumped out of that, not only threw the inmates off, but threw the officers off. You become, the longer you're there,
you're institutionalized yourself.
Well, absolutely. You see a man. A lot of times, you put these guys in street clothes. Their posture, the way they communicate, the sort of body language they have, are very telling that they have been in close contact with each other. And more often than not, like after a 20-year vet and a 20-year guy that's been incarcerated, you can't really tell their behaviors apart.
Yeah, well, I've told this story to a few folks. My very first connection or experience with the paranormal was when I first started my law enforcement career was in the Dade County Jail in Miami, and that's where I experienced my first significant paranormal event. So I can kind of attest to what you're saying. Were you aware when you went to work in the prison system, were you, especially the state prison, were you aware of the stories that permeated the place?
Well, again, like I said, my father, who is now gone, he had made some mention of stuff. He didn't want to. My dad was kind of a nuts and bolts guy. I guess I got a little bit of that from him. But it was a thing where, he did tell me about some of the violent stuff and some of the murders and some of the breakouts and all that stuff. He didn't really get off into, the heebie-jeebie side of it. He was not really comfortable with the paranormal. He had a few things that I heard once I was grown that he had experienced as a kid, kind of around probably the same time that I'd experienced things, but whereas my mind went kind of a different way toward it, his kind of closed himself off to it. You're going to go 2-3 different ways from stimulus. It's that kind of fight or flight response, and we just went down different paths. Who knows if he might have went a different way? He may have been a paranormal researcher himself.
Well, and you left the field after a while, and you got into the world of therapy. Working with special needs people, I understand, correct?
Right. Well, I teach life skills to special needs adults, and it's that's one of those things that throws people, because people like to. There's a thing that people like to do. They like to kind of go, well, okay, let's put you in this box. You're this guy. Okay, your behavior will be this. Your background will be this. It's easy to digest. It's not like that, because like I said, growing up through, dealing with paranormal stuff, but was different than what I'm dealing with, especially as adults, because, yes, I was scared of it, but then also I loved, the old Universal monsters and read, like the famous monster books and Eerie magazine and all that stuff. I was in it. I enjoyed it because that I knew was fiction. That was safe. That was like, you might want to watch a war movie, but you may not want to be in the war. You can kind of live vicariously through it in the stories, and it's always more romantic that way. And but yeah, it was strange in regards once you go into that kind of position. When I did start having experiences in the penitentiary, it was honestly I wasn't really prepared for it, because the time I did before coming there, I worked in a minimum to medium, and you would have murderers and stuff, but it was just a different thing. It was laid out in a dorm style. There was like double bunks, maybe 40, 50 men to a dorm. Maybe some might have 100, 150. But, in penitentiary, controlled movement, controlled contact, controlled everything. You have to go through a gate to get a gate to another gate to get to the yard. You have to go through so many series of lock clicks to get from one spot. Everything was controlled. So the whole temperament of the penitentiary was different.
Well, so you graduated from that. You began working with special needs adults. You then began writing. What got you down that road? And the topic you're writing on particularly, I'd be interested in that.
Well, it's one of these stories, and it's one of those deals like, I'm trying to think. Okay, like say there's somebody and they're working at a diner, and somebody comes in, and here's a lady, she's singing in the background, and she's in the back doing dishes, and somebody says, "Hey, I want to make you a star." It wasn't that glamorous, and it wasn't that contrived, but it was like this. As I'd mentioned, I'm a fan. I've been listening to like a lot of the early paranormal shows and all that since the early days, and so I might hear someone who has a story about Hollow Earth, or they might have a story about the theory of doppelgangers and the connection between aliens and the paranormal. And sometimes I'd contact these guys and say, hey, I'm really like the take you had on it. Well, I spoke to a couple people and a couple writers, and they said, as you do when you meet somebody on Facebook or wherever, and they go, "Oh, I see you worked in the penitentiary." Because they had some weird experiences, and of course you kind of tell them some of it. And one person said, "Well, hey, did you ever write these down?" I said, "Well, yeah, just from my memory from when I'm an older guy." And he said, "Can I take a look at one of them?" I'm like, I don't care. And so okay, so they looked at it and said, "This really isn't bad. Can I show it to my editor?"
Let me put you on hold right there, because we're about to take our first break, folks. We've got paranormal researcher and author Stephen A. Asher with us. His website is stepheneasher.com, all lowercase. Got a lot more to talk about, so stay with us after these few messages.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
We live in rapidly shifting times of extreme volatility and uncertainty. Such profound change brings a unique opportunity for the evolution of consciousness. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of Mission Evolution Radio Show, a program that explores the latest scientific developments and deepening spiritual truths supporting human evolution. Join me on xzbn.net, where I interview leading experts in science, physics, medicine, spirituality, and more. By applying divergent viewpoints to leading-edge topics, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truth to assist you on your path to enlightenment. More information and past episodes are available at missionevolution.org.
And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Stephen E. Asher, a folklorist, musician, author, and paranormal researcher. Steve, just before we get started, your books. What are the name of your current books you've written to so far? What are they?
Yes, sir. Real quick, just and I hate to correct you, but I want to make sure they go to the right page.
Okay.
It's Steve with an extra E, like Steve
right.
E. Asher.com.
Okay.
Not Stephen. My parents didn't have enough money.
Stephen, I apologize.
No, it's just Steve. Like I said, my parents they didn't have the money for the end, so it was just Steve. That's all we could afford. But anyway, so yeah, I have two books, and it's part of the Hauntings of series, the first book, and it's through Permuted Press and carried by Simon & Schuster. It's Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, and the second book is Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum.
Oh, okay.
And the Western Lunatic Asylum was the original name of what is known as Western State Hospital in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which is maybe 25 miles from where I'm at.
Well, I got to ask you, how do your former colleagues and your employer, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, how do they feel about your writings about the penitentiary?
Initially there was a lot of like the air kind of went out of the room because I contacted these folks. I said, because I left on good terms and everything. So I said, hey, just letting you guys know, I do plan on writing a book. And the initial thing was like, yeah, okay. Everybody wants to write a book, but not everybody starts it out, And I said, well, just understand I am writing it. It's in the process of being written, and it's going to come out. It's going to be about the penitentiary and some of the ghost stuff that's gone on there. And they're like, yeah, okay, well, yeah. And I said, I was curious if you might want to have it in the penitentiary or in the museum. And I was like, well, let's talk, when you guys get it out. They never thought I'd have it out. Uh-huh. So it wasn't like just open arms, but it wasn't like, you better not write that book. It was just like, sure, you're going to write a book, and then it come out, and then I think they were like, oh crap, this is a real thing. Oh, and it's published. It's a legitimate publishing house, and yikes. Okay, wow. Well, here we are. And what happened was I waited. I never really got any response back from them, from the administration. I touched base with them a time or two, and they just says, well, we'd have to clear it through the DLC to see if we can have the book, in the museum and whatnot. And that's okay. But what happened was I started speaking to some officers, because I understand all the stories come from other officers, 20-year vets, people right out, and then some people right out of the academy, because I wanted, fresh eyes, old eyes, all kind, different types of life, different races, all that, different religious backgrounds, because sometimes people's religious or paranormal experiences, the way they read it, the way they digest it, is through their religion. And so anyway, I wanted to have a wide berth of people. They seemed to like it. Most of the officers seemed pretty good about it, and they were behind it. Like, wow, I can't. This is crazy, man. They've got this story about 3 cell house, and they've got this about the Bible that opens up and down there in death row and to certain passages. And what was so funny is I started getting contacts from folks that had or have family that are serving time there. And so I'm thinking they're going to just tear me apart. Like, well, you shouldn't be writing about people that have died there. And, these are people, which I never tried to color these people other than people that have, whatever reason, made bad choices or been in bad situations. Sure. I didn't demonize them, nor did I glorify the officers, other than saying they have a tough job. And I try to give them as much respect as they're due. But it was funny because I asked some of these folks, hey, has there been any mention of it? And it's like, oh man, that's all they're talking about. And I'm like, oh, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because you can take it 2 different ways. And they said, officers love it, the inmates love it. Administration, you're kind of, there's some. It's one of those things that I think they never ever thought it was going to take flight, and now that it did, they kind of had a little crow, and it was just fine. That's fine. I didn't think it was going to get written either, because when it come together, I had the guy that showed his editor wanted me to come back and write a book, and I said, I'm not a writer. I'm doing good to, finish reports. I'm educated, but I'm not well educated. I'm not a writer. And they said, well, we'll work on your punctuations and whatnot. And we got it to the point where I basically had a crash course in writing books. And once first book come through, and people seemed okay with it, and people actually wanted to read it, because I did try to go, look, this is the facts. This is what the guy saw. This is what he experienced. This is what he felt had happened. And, and I would do my best to, if I knew more people in the story, I would I'd vet them. I would see what's going on. And if I could find a way to kind of disprove it, or at least give some explanation that was, more down to earth, I would probably side to that. But the ones that I couldn't dispel, and the ones that I couldn't, just push off, or the ones that I had that I could also not push off, that's the ones that went in the book. And, like I said, for most part, they've been really good about it. I think they have a clause now. There was somebody that just come to Academy and said they got a thing now that says, look, you cannot mention anything in any regards to the penitentiary in any way to anybody, in regards of news, in regards to books and all that. So I caused a new memorandum. So there we go. Well,
there you go. Your legacy.
I guess so.
It's funny because my experience has been also folks in our profession, the law enforcement profession, are extremely interested in this. I'm really surprised at how many of my colleagues and former colleagues have expressed an interest, want to know more. So I'm really not shocked that the folks you worked with took it in such a good light.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I will make a lot of movie references because my mom and dad worked a lot. I was the youngest of 7, so I was raised by television and my books that I read. But do you remember in Blazing Saddles when the sheriff just come in there, and first thing they said, the woman that was talking to him, I'm not going to use the words, but she called him a certain word. And then she come back later and said, hey, I apologize. I'm a certain woman of a certain, establishment in this town, and people talk, but here's a pie. It was like that. Publicly, people would kind of ridicule me, but then they'd come around and say, look, if I said anything in front of my captain, man, come on, he'd ride me for weeks, So, and then he'd say, well, here's what I really think. And that was a thing, you get used to kind of hearing the Ghostbusters theme, which I'm like, hey, that's a cool song I can dance to. You make a joke about it and you take the power from it. And the ones because that's the thing. First, people are going to ridicule you. Okay. And, or doubt it. And then if it looks truthful, they're going to ridicule you and try to tear you apart. And then in the end, if there's some truth to it, or, if some people are open their minds enough to it, they kind of go, well, maybe there's a possibility. But, that was just sort of the way it is. There's that thin blue line, and officers have a tough job, and people don't want to come off looking flaky, and that's just a fact. Sometimes people that see spooks and see fairies and see all this and that, see, Jerry Garcia and their toast too. They see all kinds of – well, they just see some wackadoo stuff. That's just the facts. And you just kind of got to get down to it and show them, say, look, I'm a family guy. I work with special needs kids. I do this and that. I advocate for special needs people. I'm not, I'm not walking around in a cloak in a graveyard trying to contact.
Past your psychologicals.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not trying to contact Bela Lugosi. So, which it would be a cool interview. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going all over the place, but yeah, it was very interesting. But you're right. There's a certain gallows humor to people in law enforcement, EMTs. God, yeah. You have to have a slight dark sense of humor just to cope with some of the messed up crud we see. And the fact when you work in a job that's so close to death, even people that are fairly religious will go, I'm a firm believer that, the dead cannot speak and whatnot. He says, but I have seen a few things that they might classify as something demonic. And they would have their story, and that was the only thing they have. And they, and I always tell them, I always change names, always change locations to, kind of protect the innocent, just because sometimes that comes back on people.
Well, and did you see anything in the prison? Did you have an experience in the prison yourself?
Sure did. Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you had? What is probably the one that sticks to you the most?
Man. Well, there's two of them. There was a place called Forsyth House. And understand the penitentiary come online, if I'm not mistaken, in Christmas Eve, I think, of 1888. And understand these places are still existing, just like Western State. It still function. Thing is about, like in Kentucky, man, we'll slice a piece of bread 4 ways. We'll squeeze, every bit of use out of something. So when we build a structure, it's going to the bricks fall off the place. So anyway, I was working in a place called Forsyth House, and I was working what's called a control center. And because of everything, all the doors, the gates, the locks to every floor, to every wing, to every stair, has the buzz lock system where you can flip a switch and it unhinges it and either activates it or disactivates it. Anyway, we have a series of cameras on all walks, front and back. So you have a really good vantage point of where the officers are at, if there's any activity that's going on, if somebody's trying to flood their cells, or God knows what. You're on top of it. So anyway, the way the cell house is, think about it if you say if you cut like a big sandwich in half, like a big Scooby-Doo sandwich. You cut it in half, you open it up. You can see like stacks of meat on the left side and the stacks of meat on the right side. I don't know why I did the sound effect, but I did, sorry. And then stack. So you open it up, and one side is called prison side. That faces the prison side of the building. Other side is Riverside, which faces the Cumberland River, which is on the other side of the penitentiary. It's just an easier way to, instead of going, go get open 419, just say whatever, for Riverside.
Okay. Hey, Steve.
Yes.
We are getting close to our next break. I want you to put the brakes on right there. We're going to finish this story in just a couple of minutes, okay?
Let's do it.
This is Paranormal Stakeout. My guest tonight is Steve Asher. His website is steveasher.com, so visit that. And we'll talk more about his books and his experiences in the Kentucky State Prison right after we come back from this break. So stay with us, folks.
Broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond. You're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest, Steve Asher. And Steve, just before the break, I kind of caught you in the middle of a really terrific story, one of your two major experiences in the Kentucky State Penitentiary. Let's retract that a little bit and go back over that. Give us that story again.
Right. As I was saying, there's an area called Four-Cell House, and it's divided in a left side and a right side. One's for prison side and one's for the river side. It's just an easier way to keep track of what cells. At the front and rear of each cell walk are cameras. And in the control center, where I was working, you monitor all that. And that way you know where the officer is at all times, if the officer's being attacked or if there's anything going on, people trying to start a fire in a cell or whatnot. Well, I was watching the bottom, which is down 20 walk. It goes from like 16s all the way down to 20. And there's a 20 riverside, which is on the right side. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm watching the cameras and whatnot, and this overlooks the showers. It's sort of a meritorious side where you don't have anybody that you're looking at, and it's off to itself, and that's usually for kitchen workers who have to get up first thing in the morning. It's the quickest walk in and out of the cell house, so they stay there. They go to bed pretty early. So anyway, I was there. It was late afternoon, getting close to probably 10:30 or 11 at night, close to shift change. And I'd been seeing sort of a haze, and I thought maybe it was just something was weird with the camera. Well, something started to develop in the far part of the cell wall, mm-hmm. and it looked, well, I wouldn't call it an orb, because an orb is just pretty much just dust or some sort of water vapor or something. This thing had luminescence. It had solidity. It glowed. I mean, it was like a halogen lamp. It was just huge. It was probably the size of like a beach ball you'd see at a concert or something. And it didn't just hang there. It didn't swing or bounce. It kind of hovered and went in sort of a clockwise small circle. And it would just sort of start doing that and came down further and further from the far wall toward the front camera. Well, the thing was so bright, it would sort of dim the cameras because it was too much for it to handle. Well, I'm thinking maybe something's going on. Maybe one of these guys, I don't know, got a balloon, I don't know what they got. But it didn't look like a fire. It didn't look like anything like that. But it would sort of pulsate in this brighter color. Sometimes it would change colors. And then it started doing kind of a figure eight motion. And so I'm like, that's extremely weird. The officer was up at the top. And I'm like, how am I going to get his attention without making myself sound crazy over the radio? Because this radio, everyone's going to hear it. Well, it kind of figure eighted, and it sort of strobed for a second and shot out past the left side of the camera. So the camera went dim for a second and lit back up. So I'm watching the screen like, where did it go? Looking all over these cameras. It was gone. The stairway that it should have come up was right next to where my control center was. I didn't see a thing. I didn't see a shadow. I didn't see a string. I didn't see a ball. Any movement. So the officer come down and he says, "What's going on? You've really been watching that camera all night." And I said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Honestly, I don't know. Just try me." And I said, "Okay, you're asking for it." So I told him what I saw and the lights and all this and that. And he said, "Well, yeah, that sounds about right." And I was like, "Are you serious?" I said, Yeah. See, that used to be the death row back before the new death row in Six Cell House was built. And he said there had been a lot of stabbings between death row inmates on that walk. And he said, yeah, shadows and glowing orbs, yeah, that's kind of the norm here. And I just stared at him with my mouth open. He says, "Hey, welcome to KSP." And he just was so nonchalant about it. And that's when I realized this is a different world. And that was when I had been there maybe 3 months. And the next thing that I was working in the hospital, or the infirmary as they called it, what they'd have different little holding cells, and they each had padlocks for the feed slots. You can unhook it and put the feed slot down, hand it in, and close it back up so they can't throw it at you or throw pee or God knows what on you. You know all about that. So anyway, I was going around through here. It was on midnight shift, and I'm going through, and I kept hearing a click, click, clack, clack sound. And I heard something. It was a click, pop, click, pop, click, pop. And it would get louder and quieter. So I started walking down, and I'm looking, and just maybe 2 or 3 cells ahead of me, you would see the lock, which is like a big master lock, a good-sized master lock, rise up and pop down, almost like someone was looking at the lock to make sure it hadn't been fiddled with. And that happened several times that night. And I spoke to some other people who were older that told me about an inmate that had been like the janitor at the old hospital that had burnt some years back, but some of the stuff from that hospital went there. Well, come to find out, that guy had tried to help a younger inmate who had got raped, and these guys were afraid they were going to tell on him, so they tried to set fire to the hospital, which they did, basically torched the hospital. He ran in there, the janitor, got all these other people out, got the inmate out, but he suffered smoke inhalation and it killed him. And a lot of people said that he would come back. I think they called him Red. He would come back through there, and he would be checking that because in the old days, you had turnkeys. Officers didn't have the keys. Yeah. Inmates would run them up, and they had that up until like the 80s when I first started working in institutions. The guy who trained me was a convict. He took me around, showed me what keys went to here and what to where. He did a good job. I mean, every on his birthday they'd bring him a steak dinner. He was there for life.
He was a trustee.
He was a trustee, and he was there for life. And he was like, he was like a drunk driving situation, and killed some people. And it was somebody of importance. I mean, everyone's important, but it was like related to someone's higher up in the echelon of government, and so he was there for life. So yeah, and that really freaked me out. And then what happened was, after I'd been there close to 10 years, I would have newbies, or what they called them fish when I was there. Newbies would call me and go, "Hey, I'm in the infirmary." I said, "Right." I said, "Squeaks or clicks?" He said, "Clicks. How do you?" "Okay. Have you went and looked down the hall?" And they said, "Yeah, that's what I'm calling you about." I said, "All right, look, just tell Red you're doing your job. Tell him to go lay down, and it'll quit." "Okay," saying, "Call me back." And they said, "What?" I said, "Just do it." And so they did that, and then they come back, and they said, "Man, how did you know?" I said, I've lived it. No one told me that. I learned that. I said, "Yeah, you tell all the other guys if they work down there, do this." And so I became sort of the resident ghost guy. And it was sort of a nefarious title, but I tried to teach the new guys, how to cope with this and not quit, because we've had people just walk out.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty obvious that these events really formed your desire to write and put this out in literary form. How did it help you with your other writings?
Well, you mean stuff that's not paranormal, or you mean stuff in regards to second books?
The second book, your books. Obviously, this is a big influence in you writing your first book, the Kentucky State Prison. Did it help influence you to continue writing? I guess is a better way to ask the question.
Well, I'll tell you, and I won't make it too long because I know we're limited time. My oldest son, as I had mentioned to you, he had passed away. Right. He had passed away in the process of me finishing this book, and the book almost didn't come out. But with everything going on, I had to have a focus. I had to have something to pour my mind into, because dealing with burying a young guy whose health issues we didn't think that was that bad, but when you have a brain aneurysm, it's so immediate and unexpected, it just sucks all the air out of you. And so I poured my heart into that book and all my focus. And the second book, being that it was about special needs people and orphans and things like that at a mental institution, it was very different, and it was a lot more. It was harder on me, honestly, than the prison book, because at this point I had learned a few things about writing. And it was I was able to expand on it a little bit better, and maybe put more the emotion into it. Because everybody expects, well, that guy's a triple murderer. Sure, he's going to be a ghost there. Or that guy's a rapist. Of course he's going to be haunting those places. Good for him. I'm glad he's there, but no one expects, special needs folks and things like that. And what you have is, because it was so far back, that also came online, I think 1854 or 55. I'm sorry, I don't have the paper in front of me. And it was, and they had the county poorhouse on the same property. So a lot of times if families went in there, they had kids and, they didn't get their stuff paid out by the time they were 18. These kids were in there all their formative years. They were basically institutionalized from the start and had no workable skills, and they just ducktailed into Western State or the lunatic asylum. And they had an area called Orphans Watch, and it was an overlook that used to be part of where they had TB patients. And they would set out and look out over to where the road was before the main highway was built, waiting for their parents, because they're so, how do I say, diminished. Well, they don't realize the situation they're in.
Well, and how sad is that story in that particular institution? Any particular story that strikes you?
Well, that actual story is one of the ones that kind of turns the knife in me. There was a woman who was there, fresh out of, I guess, psych classes and things, and getting her stuff done in there. And a lot of times you work under another doctor, and you're more almost like a journeyman deal. Uh-huh. So he'll handle a lot of the main caseload, but a lot of that first stuff is here. There's a lot of paperwork. You're going to learn the casework. You're going to learn how to do the diagnoses and how to transcript and all this and that. And she was working in an office that was at the end of the Orphans Watch. And she would hear little things, little noises, and she would figure it was someone's radio. Well, she would get out there and hear a voice and go down and check it out, and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And so she'd
I'm going to have to cut you off again, my friend. We're getting close to our last break. We're going to finish this story in just a second. Folks, stay with us. I got Steve Asher with us on Paranormal Stakeout on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Stay with us, and we'll be right back for our final segment in just a few minutes.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
The concept of a new age has been around since the late 19th century, yet much of its original meaning has been lost. What exactly is the new age? Is it a religion, a collection of obscure esoteric practices, a series of doomsday predictions, or an astrological event. The New Age Chronicles is a unique, complementary publication bringing reason and grounded information to separate fact from fiction. Chock full of valuable information to support you as we make the monumental shift into the new era. You won't want to miss a single innovative issue. The New Age Chronicles newspaper is coming soon to www.newagechronicles.com.
And welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. And I have tonight with me Steve Asher, author, artist, musician, folklorist, and paranormal researcher. You can find Steve on his website, steveeasher.com. He's the author of a couple books we'll talk about in just a second. But before we get going, I want to remind everybody to check out the terrific broadcast schedule on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. www.xzbn.net is where you can find all the terrific shows on the X-Zone Network's family. Also, if you want to catch all the programs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on your cell phone or your telephone, you can do that at 605-477-9614. It's again 605-477-9614. Also like to invite you to come check me out at www.paranormalstakeout.com and also at www.paranormalfbi.com, where you'll find more about my group down here in Florida. Steve, I get so enamored with your stories in the prison and these facilities. I get listening, and we had to cut you off before you finished that last story. So go ahead and finish that. She was hearing what noises?
Well, it was more than that. She was hearing what she thought was children, and at the institution now, or the hospital, we're going to call it, it's mainly adults. They have, at the situation now, they have youth facilities for children that need different things, different sort of psychological help and monitoring and whatnot. So it's not like they're just throwing everyone in like a big pen or something like that. Well, anyway, she kept hearing this, and she was coming back up the hallway, and she kept feeling something tugging on her, like something like she thought her pants had caught on something, or the hem of her skirt or whatever, and she glanced toward where there's a window, because there's a window where the overlook is, and she could see like the outlines of hands, like gripping to the bottom of her clothing. It wasn't like a semi-solid, transparent form gripping at her, but it freaked her out quite a bit, obviously. But it wasn't a thing like she didn't get the feeling that it was hurting her. It was getting a feeling of like, please help me. Mm-hmm. And into which, she was not long, obviously, running, getting her stuff and trying to get up out of there. That kind of stuff is what bothers me. And the girl put a transfer, or the lady put a transfer in for another place to do her internship after that. But, you have things like that. There's another one. There's a story called The Dead Girl on the Talking Board. And there's these two ladies that were in a relationship. And one of them was more into the paranormal, and they started kind of getting these ideas like, well, hey, I wonder if we could pick something up here, which is such a bad idea. But so they went down to where was the hydrotherapy room. Hydrotherapy, they used to do that quite a bit to deal with different emotional problems and things like that. And they'd either put them in – they don't put them in ice water, because you put somebody in ice water, it's going to kill them. Or if you put somebody in boiling water, it's going to kill them. So, but if it was warm enough or cool enough to raise or lower their body temperature to a certain point to either break – some sort of shock or break some sort of whatever to soothe a agitated condition. Well, anyway, they were doing this and that and playing with it, and at first they weren't getting anything, and then slowly they started getting more, and weird stuff started happening. The older lady in the couple said, yeah, we're done with this. I'm not doing this. And said, well, look, I don't feel comfortable you doing this. So they went home, because they had sneaked them in on their lunch breaks and do this. So they went home, and she said, look, let's not do that anymore. And she's like, well, okay, yeah. But she had already kind of gotten really into this thing, and to the point where it was sort of almost possessing her to a point, really drawing her back to it. So she started going on her own little lunch breaks because the other person had a sick mom and she was out for a couple of days dealing with her, but the other one was still working. And the one girl, her mother had got better, so she decided to surprise her girlfriend with lunch. So she went there and spoke to one of the people and says, I'm not sure. I think she's out back, eating in the commons area. Well, she wasn't in the lunchroom and she got a really bad feeling. Well, she ran to where the hydrotherapy room was. Lights were out. Couldn't, it was just, stuff was just covered with water. I was like, what in the heck's going on? And she went out looking in the hallways and she could hear some noise coming just outside to where there was sort of like a picnic area. It was extremely foggy because it had been raining. And she went out there and finally found her. She was kind of huddled up behind a tree and she didn't know what was wrong with her. And she couldn't hardly couldn't make her voice. And she looked at her throat and her throat was like really irritated. And she's like, what in the world happened? And finally she got her home. She said, look, she's not feeling well. I'm going to take her home. And she admitted that she had went in there and tried to contact something. And whatever it was, she felt like almost like a freezing wet towel was around her neck, tied around her neck. And she felt herself lifted off the ground, which she couldn't hardly fight it, which she had candles up around the Ouija board and all that. It was at the point where she didn't even have to use it. It would just spell out things. Well, in her processes of trying to kick and get away, she knocked one of the candles over on it. It kind of broke the circle and she dropped. And then she ran out. Well, they went back the next day. The older lady went to find her stuff and none of it was there. It was just, there was the only thing was looked like puddles or feet print. And apparently I've spoke with different people who'd worked there that there was a girl who was homicidal sociopathic, and they said that it was a suicide, and I'm doing air quotes, you can't see me, but a suicide about it, but then somebody said that she was murdered. So, but again, now that's speculation. So, but that was a story, and I don't know if maybe that person was trying to get revenge on who they thought done it, or maybe trying to get revenge on anybody, just lashing out. I don't know. But that's sort of the difference in it, because you expect that in a prison. You don't expect that kind of behavior from the men. I mean, people jokingly talk about the mentally ill, but these people were more than likely not in control of their faculties. Right. And then you have somebody that borderlines on someone who is what they would consider almost possessed, for a better term. It really bothers me. Like I said, it's one of those things. I wrote the book. I loved writing the book. I loved learning about the history of the place. There was a place called Pig Iron Cave adjacent that ran up under the hospital that apparently collapsed, and a bunch of kids suffocated in there over a matter of a few hours. Oh, wow. And there was older kids. It was back before labor laws, and the older kids would try to entertain the little ones and keep their spirits up by playing games with them and just singing to them and stuff. And there was a sinkhole that happened. Somebody was doing some farming, and the front end of their tractor went in it, and they started hearing the sounds of children singing. Like, it's like 100 years later, hearing children singing, and then it sounded like they're kind of gasping, and it was just, it's disturbing. It's darker stories to me than the first book, and like I said, it was one of those things. It was bittersweet because I think the stories are really good, but it was hard on me, and that's one of the things. As I told you off air, I will have a third book, which is going to do with a Catholic compound, which has like an orphanage and a whole lot of Civil War related stuff. Right. And the fourth book's going to be a revisit to the penitentiary with some stories that I didn't have the full stories to. But after that, I'm as I'd mentioned to you, me and my wife are working on some children's books about special needs children, and where I get to do some illustrations and as well as some storytelling. So, it's just one of those things. You get too far down into something, it really wears on you. Just like law enforcement, you need to be able to break away from that. You need to
take a break. I agree.
Sure.
I totally. Now you've got your own paranormal research group too, don't you? We got about 3 minutes here. You do your own research, field research, correct?
Right. I was going to say one more thing, if it's okay.
Oh, sure.
On YouTube, I have a little show, and it's called House of Asher. And it touches on everything from the old 70s horror movies that I grew up on to talking to the guys like Fred Olen Ray, who directed a lot of B movies and stuff. I interviewed him just last week, and you can find that on YouTube under House of Asher. But yes, our paranormal group is called the Caldwell County Paranormals. I live in Caldwell County, Kentucky, in a small town called Princeton. And we call ourselves Paranormals because we have an interest in the paranormal. We're not chasing this and that. We're not hunting anything. We, like you said, we don't hang ghost heads on our wall. That's not what it's about. When we do it, it's either to help folks out, to maybe disprove a situation, or try to dispel maybe some fears that maybe are unfounded, because that happens. Sometimes people read things the wrong way. And if it's something that we feel is a spirit, or what people consider a spirit, we do our best to try to, persuade it to pass over to whatever's over there. And that's the thing. I don't know what's over there. There are no experts in this.
Amen.
But yeah, that's what we do, and it's a good group of guys. We're not out as much in a large team as we were. Me and my wife do a lot more stuff one-on-one, just because it's easier to get everybody, to get us together than search everybody out and try to make sure everybody can get off work. But yeah, that's what we do.
Let me ask you this: where do you see the state of paranormal research? There's tons of groups out there. Where do you see this entire field heading, in your opinion, in our last few minute or so together?
I think it's spirited off into 2 or 3 different groups. I think you've got the come at me bro guys that's there to agitate this and that and look cool and flex for the camera. I also think you've got people that are very heartfelt and want to help people, and it's obviously you want to find activity and whatever, but they're there mainly to help the families. Then you also have people that are just straight, on the scientific end of it, there to get numbers and gather information. And I think the latter two is probably the closest to where we're at. The first kind of sort of, if you want to call it groups, I call it more like Hollywood tripe, but you have that, and there's room for that. That's great. Just like, well, they always say, you always got room for Jell-O. There's room for that if you're interested in that. But by the time you're 30s and 40s, that kind of wears thin. It
does. And hey, Steve, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. Steve Asher, check out his website at stevieasher.com. Go check out his books. And Steve, I hope to have you back on the show again sometime. Thanks for being with me, buddy.
Thanks.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.